In September 1992, a mother and her 6-year-old daughter set out on a beginner hike in Oregon's Umpqua National Forest and vanished without a trace. No signs of struggle, no final call, just 2 sets of bare footprints that stopped at the edge of the creek. 33 years later, a sealed section of the trail is reopened, and what they uncover beneath the creek bed rewrites everything we thought we knew about that day. This isn't just a disappearance. It's a memory the forest never let go. Subscribe for the full investigation. September 1st, 1992. Springfield, Oregon. Eva Raines woke before the alarm to a house that felt newly fragile, like a glass set too close to the counter's edge. In the kitchen's blue light, she laid out the last small things: 2 sandwiches in wax paper, a rattle flashlight, the folded topo map. The emergency whistle sat coiled beside it, cool against her palm the way metal is when it's waiting to be used. Down the hall, Violet slept sideways in Scooby-Doo pajamas, a stuffed raccoon hooked under her chin. Eva stood in the doorway and let herself look. "Road trip, little Finch," she whispered, and the words steadied her. By 7:15 a.m., the rust-red Subaru idled at the curb. The neighbor's porch light blinked on like a witness. Eva slid the map into the glove box over the envelope where the spare house keys lived, because that's where they always lived, and buckled Violet beside a small cooler. String cheese, baby carrots, 2 juice pouches. The sky had that pale, honest clarity that makes you think the day intends to behave. They rolled past the church with letters still clinging to a congregation that no longer met. Eva looked away without meaning to. Fleetwood Mac murmured low. Violet hummed and tapped her heels against the seat in a private metronome. At the edge of town pumps, Eva topped off the tank and checked the map by the open glove box. A green Subaru with tinted windows drifted under the far canopy, paused like it had forgotten something, then slid back to the road. When she looked again, it wasn't there. She told herself it hadn't mattered. Highway narrowed to 2-lane, then to shoulderless blacktop that made you drive like you owed the road respect. Pines gathered. Fog lifted in strips. "We'll be home by Friday," Eva said, mostly to hear it out loud. "You can tell Aunt Lorraine about the waterfall." "Will there be frogs?" Violet asked. "If we're quiet," Eva said. "Walk without waking the trees," Violet recited, pleased to get it right. "That's the trick," Eva said, and let the smile stay. By late morning, they climbed into hills where sun broke in cautious squares. The turn for Red Hawk came sudden. Hand-painted sign, gravel lot, a wooden map board fogged behind scratched plexiglass. Eva pulled in a little crooked, angled toward the trees. She cracked the passenger door for air while she reached for the day pack. Something soft slid with the shift and slipped off the bumper, a small blue rain jacket settling into needles. She meant to scoop it, and somehow didn't. "We'll grab that," she said to no one, as if speaking could pin the task to memory. They stood at the map. Family Friendly had been penciled in faded ink beside the red route line. 5 miles out and back, a shallow creek. A waterfall drawn like a fan. "Can I draw it?" Violet asked, the stub of a pencil peeking from the red pack's mouth. Violet was written in thick, smudged Sharpie on the strap, the way teachers liked things labeled. "After we see it," Eva said. "Draw what's real." 2 steps into the trees. Sound folded. Fern breath, insect stitch. The creek talking to itself somewhere ahead. Eva set a careful pace. Violet matched it and forgot and matched it again, swinging between her mother's stride and her own. Half a mile in, sun found them through a high tear in the canopy. Violet dropped to a moss mat and drew a circle for the sun and tall lines for trees. 2 stick figures, one tall, one small. The crayon skipped and left a notch in a green trunk. "That's us," she said, satisfied. Waterfall later, Ava said, and they walked on. The creek's whisper sharpened into a hush. The path dipped, the dirt darkened. Boot treads wrote quick, forgettable journals in tidy seams of mud. "I want to feel it," Violet said, already tugging at a shoe. "Bare feet on the trail?" Ava started to say no and then didn't. The bank ahead was gentle. The water looked clean and unserious. "Only to the water," she said. "Then shoes back on." Violet slid free and pressed her toes into the cool dirt, reverent. "It tickles," she said, and stepped forward like someone learning a new language. Ava kept her boots on and her hand close. At the near bank, the creek ran shin-deep and glass-clear over tame stones. On the far side, the mud showed pale and cracked from a week without rain. Violet touched the water, flinched, laughed. "It says shh," she whispered. "It does," Ava said. "It always does." Behind them, the woods adjusted their weight, less a noise than its subtraction. Ava looked back down trail. Ferns considered themselves. A jay revised a branch. The air held very still, the way a room does when someone's about to speak. "Hand," she said, and Violet gave it. They crossed in 3 quick steps, hopping stone to stone. For a breath, Ava felt footfalls land a beat behind. Careful, bare, matched to theirs. She turned. Nothing but the path and a thin scuff of their own passing. She breathed out and let the foolishness go. "Shoes," she said, and Violet dried her feet on her calves, tied imperfect bows, and stood taller for having done it herself. "Better," Ava said, meaning keep moving. They climbed the far bank. The creek softened behind them. Twice, Ava glanced back and saw nothing new, and told herself the watching feeling was only the old nervousness that came when the world got too quiet. She patted the red pack and felt the squared-off bump of the sketchbook. "Waterfall," she said, like a promise you can walk toward, and Violet nodded as if she could already see it. By Friday, the Subaru would still sit angled toward the trees, passenger door gaping a little, the blue jacket matted into needles by the bumper. 2 sets of bare prints would show at the near bank, small ones unhurried and parallel, a larger set pressing deeper behind, and then nothing on the dry side but broken mud, and the feeling that the forest had taken a breath and kept it. But on Tuesday morning, mother and daughter stepped into the trees with the ordinary certainty that trails begin and end where maps say they do. The creek said shh. The woods listened, and the path took their weight as if it expected them. September 4th, 1992, Umpqua National Forest, Oregon. The gravel cracked under Deputy Colleen Marks's tires as she pulled into the near-empty trailhead parking lot. The morning air was sharp, pine-scented, and heavy with silence. Fog clung to the forest edge like smoke that never cleared. The sun was just beginning to break through the canopy, revealing a single vehicle parked at a crooked angle near the tree line, a rust-colored Subaru Loyal. Its passenger door hung open. That was the first bad sign. A child's rain jacket lay crumpled near the back wheel, half buried beneath a scatter of pine needles. Tiny, blue, plastic buttons shaped like flowers. The kind you only found on toddler clothes. Colleen cut the engine and stepped out. Her boots sank into the damp earth as she approached the vehicle, each step deliberate. Park Ranger Tommy Abel stood nearby, hands stuffed deep into his jacket pockets, face tight. "I didn't touch anything," he said. Colleen nodded and moved toward the open door. A red hiking backpack sat on the front seat, one strap twisted like someone had taken it off in a hurry. The name Violet was written in smudged Sharpie along the side. She popped the hatchback. Inside was a mix of camping gear, a rolled-up sleeping bag, half a box of juice boxes, a bag of peanut butter crackers, a flashlight with corroded batteries. "No signs of struggle," she muttered, scanning the interior. "The permit was for 2, Tommy said quietly behind her. "Mother and daughter. Eva Raines, 35, Violet, 6. Colleen turned. How long overdue? They were supposed to come out yesterday morning. When the car was still here at sundown, we flagged it. This morning I came back and he gestured to the open door. Colleen's gaze followed the dense tree line. The trail disappeared quickly into the woods, swallowed by shadows. Any chance they left the trail? Tried a different route out? Unlikely. It's single track up there, maybe 5 miles out and back. Family friendly. Colleen shut the hatchback. Let's walk it. The trailhead entrance was barely marked. Just a wooden post carved with the words Red Hawk Trail and a sun-bleached map behind plexiglass. A chill ran along the back of Colleen's neck as they crossed into the forest, swallowed quickly by the hush of trees. Pine needles softened their steps. No birds, no wind, just the faint trickle of water in the distance. About a mile in, they reached a creek no more than 3 feet wide, threading its way across the path. That's when Tommy stopped. There, he said, crouching low. Colleen knelt beside him, squinting at the muddy bank. 2 sets of footprints. Small ones, child-sized, parallel, like she'd been walking normally. Then, a larger set behind, following close. Also barefoot, pressed deeper. The tracks reached the water. On the other side, nothing. They didn't continue up the trail. They didn't veer into the brush. The prints just stopped. Colleen stood, frowning. The ground's too dry up there to catch a print. Tommy nodded. But they should have made some disturbance, broken ferns, something. There's no sign they ever crossed. 3 days earlier, Eva Raines had packed up the Subaru in her quiet Springfield neighborhood while her daughter sat in the back seat, still in her Scooby-Doo pajamas. Violet was humming softly, holding a stuffed raccoon in her lap. It was just after 7. The sky was still a soft gray, the promise of a clear day lingering behind it. Eva had told her sister the night before, "Just us. 1 trip before school starts. I need this." She hadn't said why. She didn't need to. She'd made sure to pack a real map, not just rely on trail signs. A first aid kit, 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, a small flashlight for each of them. An emergency whistle she tucked into Violet's tiny front pocket. By the time they left the city, the radio was playing Fleetwood Mac. Violet had fallen asleep with her cheek pressed to the window. Eva didn't notice the green Subaru with tinted windows that changed lanes behind her and then disappeared. Back in the present, the search team had already set up a field tent beside the trailhead. Folding tables groaned under maps and coffee. Red pins marked the routes already covered. A handler walked her shepherd in slow loops through the brush line. Volunteers fanned out in small groups, voices crackling over radios. Still nothing. Colleen leaned over the map. If they didn't cross the creek, they either doubled back or disappeared right there. "You think someone took them?" She didn't answer right away. Eva left her wallet, her phone, their food, all still in the car. That's not someone trying to disappear. A volunteer's voice broke over the walkie. "We've got something. Upstream, under a log." Colleen and Tommy pushed through the brush until they found the man kneeling beside a fallen tree at the creek's bend. He held up a soggy sketchbook. The front cover was peeling away. Inside were crayon drawings, smudged mostly. A dog, a sun, a woman with long hair, but the last page was still clear. 2 stick figures, one tall, one short, both standing beneath trees, and behind them, a dark figure, much taller. No face. Tommy backed away slightly. "Jesus." Colleen stared at the page. "Are we sure this was here before?" "No," he said. "It wasn't. I walked this spot this morning." The woods pressed in around them, still and listening. Something was wrong here. Deeply, horribly wrong. And it had only just begun. September 5th, 1992. Umpqua National Forest, Oregon. The sketchbook sat on the center of the folding table under a clear evidence sleeve, still damp around the corners. its childish drawings warped but unmistakable. The faceless figure on the final page stared through the plastic like it had been waiting to be found. Deputy Colleen Marks hadn't looked away in nearly 10 minutes. She drew that out here, she murmured finally. On this trail, with someone watching her, or with someone already there, Tommy added, lowering his coffee. You thinking it's a third party? Colleen didn't answer. Not yet. She turned and stared into the trees. The tall silhouettes bathed in early morning fog, the same trees Violet had drawn with bright green crayon. She tried to imagine a 6-year-old stopping during a hike to sketch in her book. That meant time. That meant they weren't running. That meant whoever was out here wasn't rushing. By mid-morning, the search had widened. Forest Service brought in 2 more dogs. A helicopter circled overhead, loud and useless beneath the tree canopy. Volunteers covered the creek perimeter in 5-yard grids. Nothing. Not a shoe, not a snack wrapper, not a footprint, nothing but the ending of that drawing. 30 miles south, in a small home on the edge of Springfield, Eva Raines's older sister sat on her front porch, chain-smoking and staring at the phone. Don't tell me to be calm, she snapped at the detective on the other end. She's never late, not like this. We're doing everything we can, ma'am. She didn't even like the woods, you know that? Her voice cracked. She did this for Violet. Her idea of a good time was a bookstore and bad coffee. The silence on the line was long. When did she last speak to anyone? 3 days ago. She called to say she packed peanut butter crackers. That Violet picked the trail. A bitter, quiet pause. She sounded tired, but good tired. The call ended with no answers. The day before the disappearance, Ava and Violet had made it 3 miles up Red Hawk Trail. It was warm. A little too warm for September. The heat clung to the forest floor, and mosquitoes buzzed low near the water. Ava had tied her flannel around her waist, taken a long drink from her water bottle, and looked at her daughter perched on a rock, carefully coloring the sun into the sky. You sure you're not tired yet? She asked. Violet shook her head, then hesitated. I want to stop where the water is loud. Ava smiled faintly. All right, Violet. 1 more mile. They reached the falls around mid-afternoon. Not large, just a gentle cascade over wide rocks, emptying into a pool shallow enough for Violet to splash around. Ava laid out a towel, took off her boots, let her legs dangle in the cold water. It was the first time she'd exhaled all week. She didn't hear the distant crunch of tires and gravel, or the low metallic clink of something being unscrewed from underneath a rear bumper. She never noticed the forest go quiet. Her footprint stopped here, Colleen said, crouching once more at the creek's edge. No signs of a fall, no drag marks, no animal sign, just gone. Tommy knelt beside her. Could have been picked up. Someone met them, maybe waited, or followed. Colleen's eyes narrowed as she scanned the other side of the water. A faint disturbance in the moss caught her eye. She rose and crossed, stepping carefully to avoid contaminating the ground. There, a patch of soil, shallowly disturbed. Not footprints, but like someone had brushed pine needles back into place. She waved Tommy over. You ever seen a boot brush a trail this clean? That's intentional. She followed the line through the undergrowth. Not a path. More like a corridor, just wide enough for a person to move without snapping twigs. And no trail markers, no natural break in the brush. It wasn't a game trail. It was designed not to be found. Colleen turned back. Get me the cadaver dog. By evening, the creek was lit by halogen beams. Yellow tape fluttered between branches. The woods no longer felt like a forest. They felt like a stage. Something was hiding behind the curtain, just out of reach. The dog team led them 15 yards off trail, toward a hollow at the base of a cedar. There, half buried beneath a layer of bark and rock, was a woolen hat, bright yellow, tiny, child-sized. Violet's name tag was sewn into the brim. Colleen held it in gloved hands. It was dry, placed recently. "She dropped this?" Tommy asked. "No," Colleen said. "It was left. A warning, or a breadcrumb, and that meant someone was watching." September 6th, 1992. Location: Springfield, Oregon, Rain's family home. The living room still smelled like lavender and laundry detergent. Colleen stepped over a forgotten puzzle piece near the sofa and looked around slowly. The bookshelf was alphabetized. The tea towels were folded in perfect thirds. Violet's pink canvas shoes were lined up neatly by the back door. It was the kind of house where things didn't go missing. She was meticulous, Ava's sister Lorraine said from the hallway, even as a kid. If Ava was 5 minutes late, something was wrong. So when I didn't hear from her Saturday night, she choked off. I knew. Colleen nodded, silently taking it in. Lorraine led her to the fridge. Look! On the calendar, September 4th was circled in violet crayon. Underneath, in crooked handwriting, Hike W. Mom, Waterfall. There were no markings after that day. By noon, Lorraine had given consent for a full forensic sweep of the house. Colleen walked through each room as if the walls could talk. Violet's bedroom was a kaleidoscope of butterflies and polka dots. Stuffed animals lined the windowsill like sentries. On her nightstand sat a tape recorder. Plastic, red, Fisher-Price. Well worn. Taped to its side was a label. Do not touch, Mom rules. Colleen pressed play. Static, then a whisper of childish breath. This is Violet. We are in the woods. It's so green. Mom said I could wait. I think I saw a deer. Mom, was that a deer? Click. End of tape. Colleen rewound and listened again. The sound was peaceful, safe. But the background noise, barely audible, sounded like wind. Or, no, breathing. Not Violet's. She made a note to send the tape to audio forensics. Meanwhile, 35 miles east, the search had shifted. The cadaver dogs kept circling the same cedar tree where Violet's hat was found, but they hadn't marked for a body. They had marked for scent. Faint, but recent. Someone had been there. Alive. And they weren't anymore. A ranger named Donnie flagged Colleen down as she returned. We found something else, he said, holding up a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a Polaroid, edges curled, colors faded. 2 figures stood beside a waterfall. One was a small child in yellow. The other, heavily shadowed, back turned to the camera. This was tucked in the hollow under a flat stone. Colleen took it, chilled. That's not from a hiker. No timestamp, no camera with it, just that. Anyone know it was there? No one should have been off trail. But someone had been, and they left the photo like a signature. That evening, the forensics team delivered early results. Violet's hat had no prints, but it had been in someone's possession recently. Traces of soil not native to the creek bed. Possible basement dirt with high calcium levels. Urban or suburban origin. Could have been transported, Colleen muttered. Brought back. Like staging? Tommy asked. Or ritual. She hated saying the word out loud. Hated that it fit. 2 days later, a maintenance worker clearing storm debris along Old Highway 58 spotted something odd in the ditch. A canvas strap, frayed and sun-bleached. He tugged it free, and out came a child's backpack. Purple, Minnie Mouse, stuffed with granola wrappers, a water bottle, and one single item that didn't belong, a set of car keys. When Colleen examined them, her stomach dropped. The tag read, Rain's Subaru. Copy, do not duplicate. Back at the family home, Lorraine confirmed Eva had brought only one set. That's not possible, she whispered, staring at the keys on the table. That's the backup. I keep that here, in the kitchen drawer. Anyone else know about it? She shook her head. Nobody, except Eva. Could Violet have taken them? No, she didn't even know where they were. Colleen stared at the keys. Then someone had come here, to the house, after they were already gone. Later that night, in the motel room she was using as her command post, Colleen poured herself a lukewarm cup of coffee and unrolled the copy of Violet's final drawing. The sun, the trees, the waterfall, the faceless figure. She ran her finger over the line of crayon at the bottom, the thick black shape that seemed at first like a rock or a shadow. Only now did she realize what it might be. A doorway, half buried, under the earth. She picked up the phone. "Tell the team to recheck the creek," she said. "Start digging." September 8th, 1992. Location: Salt Fork. Trailhead: Willamette National Forest. The rain had washed away most of the prints. Colleen stood at the edge of the creek, her boots sinking slightly into the moss-softened earth. The search dogs were quiet now, their earlier urgency dulled by exhaustion and waterlogged noses. The trail had gone cold, but Colleen wasn't done. She kept circling the spot where Violet's footprints had stopped, just as the water narrowed and dipped under a small wooden footbridge. On her last loop, something caught her eye, a shallow rut in the mud. Not a footprint, but something longer, as if something had been dragged. Or someone. She called over to Ranger Donnie. "I need a shovel." By early afternoon, the team had uncovered the edge of a buried structure. It wasn't much, just a weather-worn wooden frame, mostly collapsed, embedded in the sloped bank beneath the bridge. From the outside, it looked like an old crawl space, maybe once used for trail maintenance storage. But the door was padlocked from the outside, the kind of lock you use to keep something in. It took 30 minutes to pry it open. The hinges screamed with rust, the door giving way in bursts like bones cracking. When the light finally hit the interior, what they saw wasn't a supply cache. It was a room, about 6 by 6 feet. Dirt floor, reinforced with old timber. Scratch marks lined the wooden beams near the bottom. Short, jagged, desperate. In the far corner, under a soiled blanket, was a child's pink hoodie. Colleen stepped inside, her breath caught. On the wall were faint drawings, stick figures, one tall, one small. A child had been here, and they'd been here long enough to leave a record. They sealed the site off immediately. Forensics combed every inch. No blood, no bodies, but the soil was rich with skin cells and hair, some fresh, some older, and one thing more, a candy wrapper, banana Laffy Taffy. Lorraine confirmed it was Violet's favorite. "She packed it herself," she whispered. "One piece. She was saving it." That meant Violet had made it to the room, or been taken there, and whoever brought her had left her long enough for her to eat, which also meant she had likely still been alive at least a full day after the hike. The following morning, Colleen sat across from Lorraine in Eva's sunlit kitchen. It was the first moment of stillness in 4 days. A kettle hissed low on the stove. "I need to ask about something Ava said last year," Colleen began. Lorraine nodded slowly. "She filed a police report in 1991, said someone had been inside her house. Nothing stolen, but her underwear drawer was rifled through. She was spooked but didn't press charges." "I remember," Lorraine said. "She called me after, said she thought it was someone from before." "Before what?" Lorraine hesitated, then opened a drawer. From a folder, she pulled a faded photo of Eva, no older than 15. She wore a church choir robe and a blank expression. "She lived with our aunt in Idaho for one summer, after Dad died. Something happened there. She never talked about it, but when she came back, she had nightmares for months. Slept with the light on, started locking her door." "You think it was someone from Idaho?" Lorraine's voice dropped. "I think she believed it." Colleen scribbled a note. "Did she ever give a name?" "Just one," Lorraine said. "But it wasn't a full name, just a nickname." "What was it?" Lorraine swallowed. "She called him Poppy. Said she used to hear him humming through the vent at night." That afternoon, the team tracked down a maintenance worker who used to oversee the forest structures in the late 1970s. "I remember that old hideaway," he said, chewing his lip. "Wasn't supposed to be there. Some hermit or trail squatter built it back in the 60s. We found weird stuff down there when we first cleared it. Animal bones, paper dolls, religious symbols. Real backwoods creepy. You seal it?" "We tried, but it always seemed like someone got back in. Lock changed a few times, like someone claimed it." Colleen stared at him. "Did anyone live around here back then? Anyone people avoided?" The old man's eyes darkened. "There was this guy, lived off the highway in a trailer painted black. Called himself a minister. Used to hand out flyers at gas stations. Preached about fire, about daughters being temptations. Said women were born to serve the wilderness." "What was his name?" "I don't remember his real name, just what the kids called him." Colleen already knew the answer before he said it. "They called him Poppy." That night, Colleen returned to the small motel where she'd been staying. The room smelled like old cigarettes and cleaning chemicals. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened her notebook. 2 names, 2 timelines, 1 connection. Poppy, the preacher in Idaho. Poppy, the recluse in Oregon. What if he hadn't just stayed in one place? What if he'd been moving quietly along trails and towns, living in shadows, using God as a shield? What if Eva had seen him again? Back at the forest trail, the last forensic sweep yielded one more item. A boot print deep in the mud behind the buried door. Men's size 12, lug sole. Recent. Whoever had taken Violet there might still be close. Might still be watching. September 10th, 1992. Location, Willamette County Sheriff's Office. The tape was warped. Colleen watched the technician feed it gently into the machine, the plastic reels creaking as they turned. The sound that followed was low and distorted, barely audible beneath a layer of static and hiss. Then something came through. A voice. Male. Calm. Raspy like gravel in a coffee can. "You will lie still when I speak. You will not cry. You will not scream. You are here for the river to take." Colleen felt her stomach twist. The tape had been recovered from the crawl space, hidden behind a loose beam near the ceiling, wrapped in plastic sheeting with a sticker marked 1986, 6 years old. But the voice was still crisp enough to chill the room. The technician hit pause. "There's more, but it's degraded. Could have been recorded over, maybe years ago." Colleen leaned forward. "Can we isolate the background? Any clues to where it was recorded?" "Working on it," he said, "but you're not gonna like it. Sounds like there's water nearby. Maybe a creek." Later that afternoon, Colleen sat with Lorraine on the back porch of the family home. The Oregon sky had turned to slate. The forest around them buzzed with the soft chirr of cicadas, the kind of sound that made you aware of how alone you really were. "I need to know more about that summer in Idaho," Colleen said gently. Lorraine nodded. "Eva went there in 77. Our aunt, Roseanne, lived in a farmhouse outside of Priest River. She was strict, church 5 days a week, always burning incense, always quoting Revelation. She sent Eva there as punishment." "Not exactly. More like damage control. Eva started acting out after Dad died. Wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat. Aunt Roseanne believed in deliverance, not therapy." Colleen flipped her notebook open. "Did Eva ever mention anything specific that happened in that house?" Lorraine hesitated. "She once told me about a basement she wasn't allowed in. Said the door was locked, but sometimes she heard voices coming up through the vent. Singing, humming, and once, sobbing." Colleen's pen stopped. "She say who was down there?" Lorraine looked away. She never said, only that her aunt told her the Lord kept broken things in the dark. Colleen pulled the property records the next morning. The house in Idaho had been condemned in 1981. Before that, it changed hands twice. But in both cases, The buyers backed out before moving in. One cited structural concerns, the other, unusual interior modifications. She called the local sheriff's office in Bonner County. The woman who answered was older, gravelly voiced. "That old farmhouse? We've had stories about it for decades," she said. "Teenagers used to dare each other to break in, said they heard crying from the vents. Anyone ever report actual abuse?" The woman sighed. "There was a complaint in '78. Local girl went missing. Showed up a week later with bruises and a shaved head. Said she'd run away, but wouldn't talk." Name was Ellie Stroud. Colleen's hand froze over the notepad. "Did she mention who hurt her?" "She didn't, but I remember this. When asked where she'd been, she just kept saying, 'The basement with the river voice.'" That evening, Colleen drove to the edge of town to visit an old contact. Travis Bloom, a former survivalist who now lived in a cabin with more ham radios than furniture. "You said something about weird religious symbols?" Travis asked, pouring tea that tasted faintly like dirt and lemon. Colleen slid him the photos taken inside the hidden room. Symbols carved into the timber, a stick figure with antlers, a triangle over an eye, a set of vertical lines grouped in sevens. Travis squinted. "That's backwoods theology. Not Christian, not pagan either, somewhere in between." "What do they mean?" "The lines. That's a counting system, probably days. The antlers? That's protection. But the triangle?" He tapped it, then looked up. "That means watchfulness. It's a warning to others. Someone thought they were keeping something evil inside that room." Colleen leaned back. "Or someone." At 10:42 p.m., Colleen's pager went off. They'd found a new clue, this time farther from the creek, nearly a mile upstream. A hiker's dog had unearthed it while digging beneath a hollowed tree. She arrived just after midnight. The item was bagged already. A child's sock, white with pink trim, stained with something that looked like clay. And something else, too. A single strand of hair. Long, blonde, violet. And next to the sock, buried deeper in the hollow, was a tiny wooden figure. Hand-carved, 2 stick bodies, one tall, one small, and at their feet, a third figure, flat, headless, arms buried under a painted blue wave. Colleen stared at it. They were no longer looking for a trail. They were chasing a story written in ritual. Back at the motel, she pinned the carved figure on the wall above her map. Beneath it, she added a note in sharp black ink. He knew her name. He made her into a parable. She didn't know what was coming next, but she could feel it gathering, like thunder behind the trees. September 12th, 1992. Location: Willamette County Historical Archives. The old record smelled like mildew and silence. Colleen flipped carefully through the brittle pages, the kind that crumbled if you exhaled too hard. Newspaper clippings, missing child reports, parish newsletters from churches that no longer existed. She was looking for a pattern, a shape behind the chaos, and it was starting to form. Between 1969 and 1989, 5 children had vanished within a 100-mile radius of Willamette County. All disappeared during hiking or camping trips, all between the ages of 4 and 7, all with mothers who reported hearing strange voices before they went missing. Colleen circled the name on one article. Hannah Bell, age 6, vanished in 1971 during a Pentecostal church retreat in Sweet Home. Her mother claimed to hear a man whispering scripture from the trees. "I heard him say, 'She walks with the unclean now. Let the river cleanse.'" Colleen stared at that quote for a long time, because Lorraine had mentioned something almost identical. Ava's mutterings after she returned from Idaho. She kept saying, "The river cleans them. The river makes them quiet." By early afternoon, the rain returned. Not gentle, but insistent, slapping the windows of the sheriff's office in thick sheets. The Pacific Northwest felt like it was constantly washing something away. Colleen sat in the war room. a dozen clippings pinned across a corkboard. She'd marked each child's disappearance with a red string. The resulting shape wasn't random. It resembled a circle. At the center sat a forgotten patch of land north of Priest River, where Aunt Roseanne's house once stood. The foundation was still there, but the building was long gone. She traced her finger around the radius. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. It was still moving. That evening, Colleen interviewed Ellie Stroud. Now 31 and working nights at a dry cleaner's, Ellie had only agreed to meet in the safety of a diner in downtown Portland. She lit a cigarette with a trembling hand and wouldn't take off her sunglasses, even indoors. "I only went in that house once," Ellie said. "Wasn't supposed to be there. They caught me by the creek." Colleen leaned in. "Who's they?" Ellie was quiet for a long time. The clink of forks and the hiss of the coffee machine filled the space between them. They called themselves watchers. Men in gray suits. Said they were keeping the noise down below. Below where? The basement. It didn't have stairs. Only a hatch. You went down by rope. Colleen's pen paused. "Did they take you down?" Ellie nodded once. "Told me to pray. Told me to listen to the voice. I only heard it once. It wasn't a man." Her voice cracked. "It was inside me." By the next morning, the autopsy report on the tooth fragment had arrived. Not Violet's, but human. A molar from a juvenile. No dental record match. A different child. Colleen stood over the evidence tray, staring at the tooth like it was a message. If this was a burial ground, it wasn't just Violet buried here. She walked out of the evidence room and into the hallway, heart pounding. The pattern wasn't just ritual. It was repeating. Generational. A cycle tied to symbols, scripture, and something darker. And the next cycle, she feared, had already started. By noon, she had a plan. She borrowed a 4x4 and drove deep into the mountains above the old hiking trail where Eva and Violet were last seen. The rain had stopped, but the sky still hung heavy with threat. The road dissolved into gravel, then into nothing. She got out and walked. The trees felt closer up here, like they leaned in to listen. It was nearly dusk when she saw it, tucked behind a curtain of moss and pine. A small wooden post, rotten, faded, but the carving was unmistakable. 7 came before she made 8. Colleen crouched, brushing mud from the base. Someone had left an object beneath the roots, wrapped in flannel, tied with twine. She unwrapped it. Inside was a child's mitten. Still damp, still warm. She radioed it in, then sat beside the tree, listening. For a moment, the wind stopped. And in the absolute stillness, she thought she heard something under the soil. Not a voice exactly, but a hum, a vibration, like something old, murmuring beneath the moss, something waiting to rise. September 14th, 1992. Location, Colleen's apartment, Portland, Oregon. The dreams came back that night. Not in pieces, but whole. She was 6 years old again, lying on the cold floor of a darkened room, lit only by candlelight. Her mother's voice was somewhere above her, praying, whispering, crying. Then something opened, a door in the floor, and something came up. She woke before she could see it, but her hands were shaking just like they always had when she woke from that particular dream. Like muscle memory. Like trauma forgotten, but not erased. She'd stopped having that dream when she left the church at 15, but now it was back. By mid-morning, the sky had cleared, and Colleen sat cross-legged on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by boxes she hadn't opened in years. Old journals, youth group flyers, a cracked cassette player. She found the photo at the bottom of a manila envelope. It was one of those wide church camp photos from the 80s. Everyone lined up on benches, forced smiles, awkward hands. She was 12, 3rd row, her braid tucked into a hoodie. But it wasn't her face that stopped her breath. It was the girl behind her. Big eyes, curly hair, one hand pressed to her cheek, as if trying to cover a bruise. No name written on the back. Colleen didn't remember her, but something about the hand on her own shoulder, caught mid-moment in the photo, didn't feel right. The girl was touching her, clinging, not posing. She brought the photo to Lorraine that afternoon. Lorraine's reaction was immediate. She paled and sat down hard on the edge of her porch swing. Her name was Maisie. She disappeared the summer before your final camp. Colleen stared at the girl. What happened? No one knew. They said she ran off into the woods, that she wasn't right in the head. But I never believed that. Lorraine looked up. She used to complain about the voice too. Said she could hear it humming in her pillow at night. One morning, she woke up with soil under her fingernails and didn't know why. Colleen sat back, stunned. That exact thing had happened to her at age 7, but she'd buried it, literally and mentally. Her mother had chalked it up to night terrors and scrubbed her hands raw. Where was she last seen? Colleen asked. Lorraine didn't hesitate. Same trail as Ava. The next day, Colleen returned to the hiking trailhead alone. No camera crew, no backup, just a notepad, a flashlight, and a memory she couldn't explain. Something in her was guiding her. She moved slowly down the ridge where the creek widened and flattened into soft, muddy banks. The place where Violet's footprints had stopped. Only now, Colleen saw it differently. Not just an end. A door. She stepped off the path and walked 30 yards into the trees. Moss clung to everything. The air was close and wet. Then, almost hidden beneath a rotted pine, she saw the shape of old stone. Square, man-made. A well. Not just any well, one with rebar welded across the top. Old police tape still clung to one edge, torn and limp. She crouched beside it. The air rising from below was cold and faintly sweet. She lowered the flashlight. The beam caught something pale. A stuffed animal. A lamb. Matted and chewed, but unmistakable. She filed the discovery and pushed for excavation, but red tape stalled her. The site had been deemed non-essential after a shallow dig turned up nothing back in 1986. Still, she filed her own request for reclassification. Back at the sheriff's office, she reviewed her original case file. Missing pages, misfiled reports, even a full cassette tape logged and then never located. It was labeled Ava Nelson, Session Number 5. But the box was empty. She went to the evidence room. Nothing. She went to the archives. Still nothing. Whoever had removed it had done so decades ago, or recently, which meant the pattern wasn't only spiritual or generational. It was protected. Someone was still guarding it. That night, she received an envelope under her apartment door. No return address. Just her name, typed in all caps. Inside was a Polaroid. A girl in a white dress, standing at the edge of the same creek. Not smiling. Barefoot. A black mark smudged over her eyes. And on the back, a date. July 3rd, 1986. And a sentence, she followed the voice willingly. Colleen barely slept. The dream came again, but this time she descended into the room with a hatch. Not the hatch of her dream, but the one Ellie described. A rope hanging down, a smell rising up, rot, salt, and something else. She heard breathing, close, then a hand on her shoulder. When she turned, the face was blank. No eyes, only the sound of humming, growing louder until it was inside her. She woke with her heart racing and her fingers clawing the blanket. She looked at her hands. They were covered in dirt. Again. Just like when she was 7. Just like Maisie. September 16th, 1992. Location, Deschutes County Library, Oregon. It was raining again. Hard. Colleen sat hunched in the corner of the county library, away from the windows, surrounded by photocopies, old sermon transcripts, and hand-labeled VHS tapes from the local public access archive. The librarian didn't ask questions, just kept bringing her more boxes as requested. The name she was searching for wasn't Eva Nelson. It was Reverend Cale Wendell. He was the founder of the Old Spirit Promise congregation, the one her mother had joined when Colleen was a toddler. The same church that had merged with a larger Pentecostal group in the mid-1980s after several child disappearances drew state scrutiny. But something deeper was buried beneath the public story. A pamphlet, water-stained and badly copied, was clipped to the back of one 1983 file. Promise through obedience, a doctrine of separation. It wasn't published by the church. It was marked internal use only. She skimmed it, and her stomach turned. Phrases like unseen refining, vocal discipline, and silent testing of the little ones appeared over and over. The most chilling line was underlined in red. The clearest paths to glory are often carved from a child's unresisting heart. She put the folder down, hands shaking, a bitter taste in her mouth. By late afternoon, she was in her car on the phone with Lorraine. "I need you to be honest with me," Colleen said. "Did my mother believe in this doctrine?" There was silence on the line. Then a sigh. She never said it out loud. "But yes, I think she did." "Did she ever talk about hearing things?" "She talked about the voice constantly. Said she could hear it in the walls of your bedroom when you were little." Colleen's breath hitched. "And did I? You'd cry in your sleep. You'd beg her to make it stop. I remember it like it was yesterday. She'd hold your face and tell you it wasn't pain. It was testing. 'Don't resist,' she'd whisper." Colleen closed her eyes. Lorraine lowered her voice. "She used to call you the vessel, Colleen. I didn't understand what it meant back then, but I do now." The next morning she drove back to the creek, not to search, to listen. The trees stood still. The stream gurgled along its banks. No birds, no wind. She walked farther this time, beyond the well, deeper into the uncut brush, past a patch of alder trees where the ground dipped suddenly. Her foot caught on something hard beneath the leaves. She knelt and pulled back debris. Wood, then metal, a trap door, buried in the earth. She froze. It wasn't new, moss-covered. The handle rusted out, but the shape was clear, a square framed in iron, a lock welded shut. She didn't try to open it, not yet. Instead, she took photos, marked the GPS location, and backed away. Whatever was under there, it wasn't ready to be unearthed alone. That evening, she finally listened to the only surviving tape of Eva Nelson's last counseling session with her church. The one marked Session Number 4. She had to use her old cassette player. Its whirring plastic sound filled the silence as the tape began. Eva's voice was small. She sounded drugged. "It sings to me at night, but only when I'm under the blanket." Then the Reverend's voice, smooth and calm. "What does it say, sweetheart?" "That I don't belong to her anymore. That I'm ready." "And what does that mean to you, being ready?" "It means the hush will come, that my feet won't make sound anymore, that I'll walk without waking the trees." Then static. Then the Reverend again. "Good, Eva. Very good. Obedience is the root of elevation." Then, "We'll take you to the water tomorrow. You'll see her there. You'll see the mother of the hush." The tape clicked. Colleen hit stop and sat for a long time in the dark. She didn't know what was worse, the words themselves or how familiar they felt. She had heard those exact phrases as a child. Her mother used them like lullabies. "Walk without waking the trees. The hush will come. Obedience brings glory." She remembered the smell of anise oil, the sing-song humming in the dark, the cold, hard floor and hands on her forehead pressing down. She remembered waking up underground once, or thinking she had. And now she wasn't sure it had been a dream. That night she returned to the location of the trapdoor. Not alone. She'd called Sheriff Mendez, who had reluctantly agreed to join her after seeing the photos and matching GPS to Eva's case file. The area had never been mapped. They arrived just before sundown. Mendez knelt beside the trap door. That weld's not 30 years old, maybe 10. Whoever sealed it did it after the official investigation. They brought in a battery-powered saw. It took 20 minutes to cut through the rusted lock. Colleen held her breath as Mendez pried the hatch open. A wave of stale air rushed out, mold, damp wood, and something that made her eyes burn. They lowered a flashlight. A ladder descended into darkness. Carved into the wood, just below the hatch, only the obedient return. Mendez called for backup. Colleen didn't wait. She climbed down. The ladder creaked. The air grew colder. Then her feet hit packed dirt. It wasn't a cellar. It was a corridor, lined with children's shoes. Dozens of them, left toe to right toe, perfectly spaced. She followed the path with the flashlight until it opened into a circular room. Stone walls, candle stubs in every corner, and a single chair in the center. On the chair, a child's backpack, violets, September 16, 1992. Night location, subterranean chamber beneath the creek ridge. Colleen didn't speak. She couldn't. She stood in the doorway of the stone chamber, breath shallow, fingers clenched tight around the flashlight. The walls were smooth but darkened with smoke. Crude etchings covered them, crosses turned upside down, stick figures with hollow eyes, spirals that looped inward with no clear end. The candles, at least 30 of them, had been burned down to wax puddles. Some were red, some black. But her eyes kept returning to the chair, to the backpack, to the faded purple zipper, partially open. Violet's name tag still attached. Sheriff Mendez crouched beside it, gloved hands steady. He unzipped it slowly. Inside, a juice box, moldy and collapsed. A granola bar in a half-torn wrapper. A plush rabbit with one eye missing. A small folded piece of paper. He held it up. It was a crayon drawing. A woman, tall and thin, with arms too long. Her mouth was open, screaming. Her eyes were scribbled out. Beneath the figure, in red letters, "She comes through the water." Backup arrived 20 minutes later. 2 deputies, flashlights, gear bags, and a portable generator to light the room. No one wanted to touch the shoes. They lined the walls of the passageway like an audience. All sizes, all children's. Some fresh, others cracked with age. All placed deliberately. Not discarded, arranged. The team split up. Mendez stayed with Colleen, inspecting the walls and etchings. One deputy examined the ladder shaft. Another discovered a second tunnel, narrow and sloped downward, blocked by a chain. What the hell was this place? Mendez muttered. Colleen didn't answer. Her eyes had locked onto something in the far corner. A small wooden box, hand-carved. On its lid, in crooked lettering, "Obedience Tithes." Inside were teeth. Children's teeth. Dozens of them. Filed, sorted, some wrapped in muslin. One even tagged with a date. May 11th, 1984. Mendez cursed under his breath. "We need forensics, now!" But Colleen didn't move. Because she remembered that date. It was the day her mother made her swallow something bitter before sending her to the hush room. She had vomited afterward. Her gums had bled. When the state forensic team arrived just after midnight, the mood in the chamber changed. The deputies fell quiet. The scientists spoke in hushed tones. They took photos, measured wall distances, removed the backpack and the box of teeth. It would take days to process everything, but Mendez already knew what it was. "It's a ritual chamber," he said. "Religious psychosis, child indoctrination, probably abuse, maybe worse." But Colleen wasn't convinced this was just about doctrine. The signs pointed to practice, repetition, and the drawings weren't metaphors. Back at her cabin, long past 3 a.m., Colleen couldn't sleep. The image of that underground room pulsed behind her eyes, the way the shoes faced outward, the whisper she swore she heard behind her when the hatch first opened, like someone exhaling through their teeth. She started taping her own recollections, voice journal. She pressed record. I remember being in the dark, a lot. My mom called it reflection time, but I think it was something else. I remember hearing water through the walls and footsteps overhead, always overhead. One time, I woke up with my socks wet and leaves in my hair. I must have been sleepwalking, but the door was locked. I told her. She said I was dreaming, but I wasn't. She stopped the tape. Listened to the playback. Near the end, barely audible, was a second voice. Not hers. A breathy whisper. Don't wake the trees. Colleen dropped the recorder. She returned to the church the next morning. The old one. Spirit Promise's original structure, now long abandoned. She had to break in through a side window. Dust hung in the air like spores. Pews overturned, cobwebs connecting rafters, hymnals rotting on the floor. She didn't know what she was looking for until she saw it. The baptismal. It was dry, cracked, layered in soot. But the drain was open, revealing a concrete pipe beneath. It wasn't for plumbing. It was a tunnel, a child-sized one. She knelt, shined her flashlight in, and saw what looked like drag marks on the inside edge of the concrete, and something else, etched along the inner curve. The hush begins in water. Only the clean are chosen. She pulled back, heart pounding. Sheriff Mendez met her at the property an hour later. She showed him everything. They agreed to call in ground-penetrating radar for the church floor and surrounding yard, but he didn't hide his worry. If what you're saying is true, this wasn't just some fringe church. This was a system, with infrastructure, tunnels, rooms, chains, ritual objects. And victims, Colleen said. Violet's backpack proves that. Mendez nodded. I think it's bigger than just her. That night, Colleen dreamed of the creek again. Only this time, she wasn't alone. She was underground, barefoot, in a corridor lined with shoes. A light flickered behind her. A sound like humming came from the far end. And then she saw her, Violet, standing with her back to Colleen, holding the plush rabbit. She turned slowly. Her eyes were blacked out. When she opened her mouth, the sound that came out wasn't a scream. It was water, rushing, choking, flooding the chamber. Colleen jolted awake, gasping for air. The tape recorder was still on, and someone had spoken into it again. You're almost ready, Vessel. September 17th, 1992. Afternoon location, Creek Ridge. Spirit Promise Grounds. Colleen stood beside the baptismal, waiting for the sound of the generator to kick in. The GPR crew had arrived with radar units and composite sensors. 4 technicians, 2 deputies, and Sheriff Mendez were already mapping a grid across the cracked sanctuary floor. Outside, yellow tape flapped in the wind. The church smelled like mold and dead insects. Decades of silence pressed against the rotted walls. But what Colleen felt wasn't fear. It was recognition. Like a song she'd forgotten but still knew the tune to. Her boots scuffed the concrete where the baptismal pipe fed beneath the altar. And that's where the first anomaly appeared. It took 20 minutes of scanning before the technician flagged something. Subsurface cavity, roughly 4 feet deep, irregular perimeter. Could be natural, but shapes too clean. Mendez crouched beside the monitor. Could be a crawl space? The tech hesitated. Possibly, but something's been added. I'm reading voids and metal, like hinges. A door, hidden under the altar. The crew brought in chisels and a concrete saw. The air turned chalky with dust. They cut through the top layer and lifted the slab. Underneath, a wooden hatch sealed with rusted bolts. The same design as the one by the creek. Mendez pried it open. The air that escaped was heavy and sweet, a rot that hadn't seen daylight in years. A metal ladder descended into pitch black. Deputy Rizzo dropped a light. It clattered, bounced, and kept bouncing. Then silence. Mendez turned to Colleen. "You stay here." But she was already lowering herself down. The chamber beneath the altar was colder than the one near the creek. Colleen could feel it in her teeth. Her flashlight caught more symbols, etched in a tighter, more desperate hand. Spirals inside spirals, slanted crosses. One word over and over. Vessel. Then she saw the wall of drawings. Pages tacked in crooked rows. Children's drawings, dozens of them. Some were of trees, others of fire, or a black sun with tendrils. But in the center of nearly every picture was the woman, tall, thin, faceless, with hands that reached the ground. In one drawing she had snakes for hair. In another she was rising from the creek, holding a child upside down. Colleen stepped deeper into the room. That's when she saw the mirror. It stood at the far end, 7 feet tall, gilt frame, cracked across the center. But it wasn't reflecting the chamber. It was reflecting a room that didn't exist. A white room. Sterile. With a chair in the center and restraints on the arms. Colleen stepped closer. The image shifted. She saw herself in the chair. Younger, maybe 6, mouth open, crying. Then gone. Just her reflection again. She staggered back as Mendez descended behind her. "You okay?" She didn't answer right away. "There's something more," she whispered. "Something deeper." They didn't find stairs, but they did find a vent. A narrow shaft behind the mirror that led down, sloped and dry. Too tight for an adult to crawl through. Colleen stared at it. "I remember this," she said. They brought in thermal scopes to examine the vent system. What they discovered made Mendez go pale. The vent led to 4 more chambers, spaced like a cross beneath the foundation of the old church. They were empty now, but one had scratch marks on the walls, and another had names carved into the stone. Like tallies. First names only. Some familiar, some not. One of them said, Colleen, and beneath it, tithe accepted. Colleen left the church in silence. She didn't speak as the team began closing up. She didn't speak as Mendez told her they'd need a warrant to start excavating the other 3 quadrants. She didn't even speak when he offered to drive her home. She walked the ridge trail instead. Alone, back to the creek, to the place where Violet vanished, and where she had almost drowned once, though her mother swore it never happened. She stood at the creek bed, staring at the churn of brown water. Then she heard it. A soft voice, a child's, behind her, whispering, "Don't let her take me again." Colleen turned. Nothing there, only leaves. But her arms broke out in goose flesh, because the voice hadn't come from behind her. It had come from inside her own mouth. That night she opened the locked chest at the back of her cabin closet. Inside, her old Sunday dress, her mother's letters, and the photo. The one she'd always told herself was a nightmare. But it wasn't. It was real. A black and white Polaroid. Dated March 14th, 1985. A little girl, her, standing by the creek. And behind her, the woman. Not a costume, not a trick of the light. She was tall, faceless, and reaching for Colleen's shoulder. September 18th, 1992. Morning location, Creek Ridge. Sheriff's Department. The mug sat untouched on Mendez's desk. Colleen stared at the cold coffee, her fingers trembling slightly. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. Not after what she saw in the mirror, or the Polaroid she found tucked in her mother's chest like a confession. Sheriff Mendez leaned forward. "That picture? You swear it's from '85? It's real." Her voice cracked. "That thing was behind me, and my mother took the photo." He studied her. "And you think it's the same woman, if it is a woman, that Violet saw? that you both saw? Colleen nodded slowly. I think she's been here longer than anyone realizes. And I don't think she's human. Mendez didn't laugh. He didn't flinch. Instead, he opened the folder on his desk and slid out 4 photographs. Taken at Spirit Promise between 77 and 86, he said. Confiscated from a raid back when they were still trying to prove abuse. The photos were grainy, sun-faded. Children gathered in ritualistic poses. Candles, chalk symbols on the floor. A woman presiding, face always turned or blurred or oddly elongated. Colleen's breath caught. In one image, the figure wore a crown of bones. In another, her hands were in motion, but her arms bent wrong, like they weren't jointed right. She was never identified, Mendez said. We always assumed it was some cult actress they paid. Until this. He laid down the thermal scan from under the church altar. The image showed 4 chambers and a signature heat void deep under the creek. Colleen pointed to the vent lines. They lead back to the creek bed. Mendez nodded. So she didn't just take Violet, Colleen whispered. She brought her home. Later that afternoon, Colleen walked the river trail behind the sheriff's station, trailing the same route her mother once forced her to memorize as a child. Each time she blinked, the image of the woman loomed behind her eyes, taller than the trees, faceless and flickering like a mirage. She paused near the old stone footbridge. Someone else was there, a girl, maybe 10 years old, kneeling in the tall grass. Violet? The girl turned. It wasn't her, but her face. It moved wrong, not distorted. More like unfinished, like someone trying to remember what a little girl was supposed to look like but hadn't quite figured it out. The girl tilted her head, then smiled. Too wide, too still. Colleen stumbled back. The girl opened her mouth and mimicked her voice. Don't let her take me again. And vanished. That night, Mendez drove Colleen to the county archive warehouse just outside town. He had a theory. One rooted not in ghosts or myths, but in patterns. I want to show you something, he said, flipping open a decades-old record book. Child disappearances, not just here, all over the northern counties. He ran his finger down the entries. 1,971, 1,972, 1,973, 1,974, 1,975, 1,976. Each case involved a girl aged between 4 and 10. Each one vanished near a creek, a ridge, or woods. Each within walking distance of a religious property, abandoned or active. It's every 6 or 7 years, Mendez said. Some gap longer, some shorter. But it's always a girl, always alone, and the body is never found. Colleen's stomach knotted. A ritual. Or a tithe, he said. They traced property records for Spirit Promise. One parcel, in particular, caught Colleen's eye. It wasn't the sanctuary or the cabins. It was the field west of the compound, the one where wildflowers grew in perfect, unnatural rings. Mendez tapped it. No building was ever recorded there. Colleen shook her head. That's not true. My mother brought me there once. She called it the waiting room, said if I ever forgot who I was, I had to sit still and wait until the woman came. The woman? She called her Mother Creek. By dawn, they were back at the site. The field was empty, the soil soft. But beneath the tallest circle of bluebells, the GPR buzzed with activity. 3 feet down, a large, hollow chamber, metal-lined, rectangular. Another hatch, but this one had been welded shut. It took hours to cut through. Inside, a cylindrical room with no windows. 4 chairs, no lights, no toys. Just a floor drain and chains on the walls, and one small blood-stained slipper, size 3T. The tag still legible, property of Violet Rose Abbott. Colleen turned away and vomited. But what chilled her more was the inscription etched into the wall, behind the third chair. The vessel must not speak. Back at her cabin, Colleen pored over her mother's old journals. Half of them burned at the edges, the rest nearly illegible. But one entry stood out. March 12th, 1985. She's begun seeing the woman again. I warned her not to speak. If she tells anyone, the promise breaks. I can't lose another one to the water. The creek already took the first. I won't give her the second. Another. March 14th, 1985. Took the photo she doesn't remember. Good. We offer in silence. Colleen dropped the journal. Her mother hadn't just let her be taken. She'd offered her. Outside, the sky churned with clouds. Thunder rolled over the ridge. Colleen looked out the window and saw a figure standing at the edge of the woods, motionless, faceless. Not tall like before, but wearing a child's dress, the same dress Violet wore when she disappeared. And next to her, the woman, Mother Creek. Only this time she wasn't flickering. She was real, solid, and smiling. September 19th, 1992. Nightfall location, Spirit Promise Field. Hatch. The door groaned open. Mendez held the flashlight steady as Colleen descended into the second chamber beneath the field. The air was thicker here, damp, metallic, tinged with rot and something older. The floor was concrete, circular. Not a cell this time. An altar, dead center. Chains hung from the rafters like veins. A metal table stood to one side, covered in cloth that hadn't been touched in decades. Bones littered the corners. Small ones. But it was the markings on the wall that made her knees buckle. Carved into the stone were dozens of names, etched in different hands. Some scratched by fingernails, some by knives, some backwards, as if done in a mirror. And above them, one sentence in perfectly aligned capital letters. To remember her is to summon her. Mendez swallowed. This is premeditated. This was never just neglect. It's a system, or a theology, Colleen whispered. On the far wall, a mural was painted in crude red. A woman's silhouette towering above a row of children. No eyes, no mouth. Just long arms, too long, and fingers that ended in roots. Beneath it, a final inscription. The firstborn stays below. The lastborn opens the door. Colleen stumbled back. Lastborn, the door. Violet, she said. She was the last one. She unlocked this. Mendez's radio crackled. Deputy Ray here. Sheriff? We've got movement at the creek bed. Thermal's lighting up. Something's digging, fast. They raced back to the site of the original thermal anomaly near the creek. A trench had formed in the mud overnight, fresh, wet, and deep. Mendez ordered backup, drones, floodlights. They brought in an excavator. Hours passed. At 4:17 a.m., they struck something metallic. A sealed vault. No visible hinges. Mendez touched the side, then jerked his hand away. Ice cold. Colleen crouched down. Frost crept outward in spiderweb patterns from the hatch, despite the 70-degree night. And on the vault surface, a handprint, child-sized, burned into the steel. She stared at it, then whispered, "She's still alive." Mendez looked at her. "You're sure?" Colleen didn't hesitate. "I feel it." By sunrise, the vault was cracked open using industrial equipment. Inside, a corridor, lined in reflective obsidian. Colleen stepped forward. The air shifted, pressing inward. At the end of the corridor sat a small room, circular and windowless, identical to the first chamber they found. Only this one had a mirror covering every wall. In the center, Violet, unmoving, eyes closed, sitting in a chair bolted to the floor. But when Colleen touched her arm, Violet's eyes snapped open, and she screamed. The sound wasn't human. It came in waves, shrill, overlapping, layered, like multiple voices collapsing through her throat. The mirrors rippled. Then Violet stopped. Her eyes rolled back, and a voice came out that was not Violet's. "She gave you once, and we returned her broken. You came again, but now the trade is yours." Colleen staggered back. No, I didn't offer anything." "But you remembered." All around her, the mirrors began to shimmer with images, flickering memories. Her mother leading her into the creek. The photo. The woman standing behind her in the mirror. The dreams, the bleeding feet. Her reflection twisted. Not just distorted, but multiplied. 10, 20, 30 Colleens, each a little off. And then the original Violet stood in one of the mirrors, smiling, mouth sewn shut. Mendez grabbed her arm. "We're pulling her out." But Colleen turned. "Number, if she comes out now, she'll never be her again." Outside, EMTs waited. Colleen and Mendez carried Violet up. Her body was limp, but alive. Her lips twitched. Her voice was faint, breathless. "She told me. You were next." Then she passed out. The mirrors behind them shattered, and the vault imploded, sealing itself as if it had never been touched. 12 hours later, Creek Ridge Regional Hospital Colleen sat beside Violet's bed. The girl hadn't woken. Her vitals were stable, but her brain scans showed unusual activity. Non-epileptic waves, erratic and looping, like déjà vu playing on repeat. Mendez entered with a folder. "They found something else," he said. Colleen opened it. Inside, a photo, dated 1971. A missing child from another town. Same dress as Violet, same haircut, and standing behind her in the image, obscured but unmistakable, the woman. Faceless, grinning, timeless. That night, Colleen returned to the trail. Alone. No flashlight, just her boots and the cold wind in her chest. She reached the creek. The water shimmered with moonlight. And on the far side stood the woman. Not walking, not floating, waiting. Colleen stepped into the water. It rose quickly, up to her knees, then her waist. She didn't stop, didn't breathe, until she stood face to face with the thing that had taken her childhood. The woman leaned down and whispered in her ear. Colleen nodded, then turned and walked back out of the water. October 26th, 2025. Jasper County, Missouri. The trail is closed now. Officially, it was due to flooding and unstable terrain, but locals say it's because of what happened in the summer of '92 and what resurfaced in 2024. Children still whisper about the girl who came back with no shadow, about the woman who watches from the creek without eyes, about the ones who go too far and never come back the same. But no one talks about Colleen Marshall, because she never came back at all. Her Jeep was found parked at the overlook weeks after the last excavation crew left. Keys in the ignition. Driver's seat soaked through from rain. A single footprint, bare, small, on the passenger side dashboard. No trace of Colleen, no forced entry, no sign of struggle. Theories swirled. Suicide, disappearance, a staged escape. But her badge was still clipped to the visor, and the photo from her childhood, the one of her mother beside the creek, was gone from the glove box. She had taken it with her. Violet Connolly recovered mostly. She was placed with extended family out of state, changed her name, didn't speak for 3 months. When she finally did, it was only to ask one question. Did the water remember me? They didn't understand, but they told her no, that it was over, that it had been just a place, just a nightmare. She smiled and never asked again. In a storage room at the Jasper County Sheriff's Office, there's a locked evidence box labeled Case 92-0637, Creek Trail Incident. Inside it, a pair of worn hiking boots filled with sand, a sealed field journal with Colleen's handwriting on every page, except the last one, which is blank but warm to the touch, and an undeveloped roll of film. No one has dared to process it, because etched into the edge of the film, in scratches only visible under a microscope, are 4 words: she remembers who left. Some nights, when the fog comes in early, hikers claim they hear a woman's voice echoing from the woods. Not screaming, not weeping, just a low hum, like a lullaby sung underwater, the kind a mother would sing when she knew her child wouldn't survive the night.